for more on the recently concluded G8 summit held in Northern Ireland. I'm joined by Henry Ridgwell from our London bureau. Thank you so much for joining us today, Henry.
Pleasure to be here.
So at the conclusion of the summit, British Prime Minister David Cameron said that this was, or at least he declared the deal that was signed, the biggest trade deal in history. Tell us about this deal and what does it mean for Africa in particular?
Well, at the moment, there's a lot of talk and a lot of rhetoric about the potential size of this trade deal. There were talk of numbers of something like benefits to the EU of $150 billion, to the US of $100 billion, and even to the rest of the world, including Africa, of up to $80 billion a year. But that's all it is so far. It's just talk. There's a lot of obstacles to be overcome. And a lot of people who will object to the markets in both Europe and the US being opened to each other. Essentially, what it boils down to is an argument over tariffs and regulation. At the moment, if you want to import certain goods into the US and the EU, including from Africa, so a lot of agricultural products, then you have to pay a big tariff to do that, to access those European markets, or the American markets likewise. The idea of this deal is to knock down those tariffs, knock down the walls, and make it a free playing field for anyone to trade on. The second challenge they'll have to overcome is on regulation. If they want to, for example, trade in drugs, which are very important, obviously, for fighting disease across the world. At the moment, a lot of the drugs are regulated by the US market, the European market, African countries separately. They want to knock down those barriers as well and again, make it all a level playing field. But whether this can actually be achieved has a lot to be proved so far. If it did go ahead, then Africa could benefit by producing products that could then be sold on without those high tariffs in Europe, and America supply parts and other services to Africa, to American and European companies, and potentially access markets that consist of 800 million people. So it is a huge deal we're talking about, but a long way to go politically.
Now, trade is one of the 3 T's that I understand was being discussed at this summit. Among them also the issue of taxes, which is of big concern to a lot of African countries, including the president of Guinea, who raised it in the piece we ran earlier, and also the issue of transparency. Let's talk about taxes first.
That's right. It's a big issue for the host of the G8 summit, David Cameron, who put it at the centre of the negotiations and talks that took place over the 2 days. He wanted a deal to make it difficult or impossible for companies to shift profits from one country to another. At the moment, he claims, and a lot of campaigners claim, that multinational corporations set up companies in countries like Malawi, Zambia, for example, sugar production companies there were singled out by campaigners in Britain, where the product is produced in Africa by African workers, and the profit that's made on that product is then siphoned off and transferred into a company in a low-tax economy like Ireland or Luxembourg. And at the moment, it's very easy for companies to do that because the legislation and the banking arrangements are all very secret, and they don't have to publish their tax arrangements in certain jurisdictions. What David Cameron wanted was a sort of public registry whereby all multinational companies had to show where they harboured all their taxes, where they harboured all their profits and so on. So it was easy to trace exactly where they are putting their money, and then they could either make it illegal for them to transfer those profits out of countries like Zambia, Malawi, Guinea, as you mentioned, and so on, or that public pressure would force those companies to pump more of their profits, to keep more of the profits in Africa or in the other countries of production.
Before you go, Henry, and unfortunately we've just run out of time, on the issue of alleviating hunger and fighting that particular issue, what can be expected? If you can answer that in about 30 seconds.
Yeah, well, there was more talk on building on the pledges that were made in previous G8 summits, in particular the G8 summit of 2012, where there was this global alliance against hunger worldwide and an effort really to open up agriculture, for example, in Africa to private investment. So a lot of the leaders want private companies from the developed world to invest heavily in African agriculture. Not all people see that as a good thing. They think that the situation at the moment is better with smallholder farmers supplying the populations of countries with their food. They fear that if big multinational companies come in and take over African agriculture, then the profits will ultimately be taken back to the developed countries, and the people will suffer.
Well, thank you so much, Henry Ridgwell, for tying that up so nicely for us.